It's the beginning of the end. Those were the last words the old prophet uttered before the world plunged into darkness. The year was 2026, and the earth had become unrecognizable. What was once vibrant and full of life was now a barren wasteland. The cities still stood, but they were nothing more than hollow structures, their lights a feeble attempt to hide the darkness that had overtaken the hearts of mankind. The streets, once filled with the sounds of laughter, had fallen silent. The cries of the innocent had replaced the whispers of hope. In the midst of it all, one truth remained undeniable: faith had been forgotten. It was in this world, on the brink of collapse, that a man would rise. His name was spoken with reverence in every corner of the earth. He was hailed as a savior, a visionary. His promises of peace and prosperity echoed through the airwaves, reaching even the most desolate corners of the globe. But there was something in his eyes, something dark and hidden, a shadow that whispered of something far more sinister. As the world watched, blind to the truth, he claimed victory over the greatest war mankind had ever known. Flags were raised, nations united under his rule, the people cheered, unaware that the very freedoms they sought were slipping through their fingers. And when they believed they had conquered the heavens, the sky responded. The seals were broken. The heavens trembled with a sound that could not be described by words. It wasn't thunder, nor was it the crash of distant waves. It was something ancient, something inevitable. From the depths of the firmament, a light brighter than 1,000 suns shone upon the earth. The Lamb had come. His presence cut through the veil of time and space, revealing truths that were meant to remain hidden. The earth had long forgotten its creator, and now it was time for the reckoning. The man who had promised peace, the man who claimed to have conquered the earth, was but a pawn in a game far greater than he could ever understand. And with that, the first seal was broken. A figure on horseback, dressed in white, emerged from the sky. His crown gleamed in the light, his bow aimed at the hearts of mankind. He was a conqueror, but not of lands. He conquered faith and the world. They welcomed him with open arms, praising him as the one who would lead them into a new age. But the horseman did not come to deliver peace. He came to conquer with deception. On the ground, chaos began to spread like wildfire. As nations united in false harmony, the skies above darkened. The very fabric of the world seemed to unravel. Would humanity survive the storm? The first seal has been broken. The words echoed in the heavens, and with them everything changed. The world had reached the edge. Mankind had risen to power, blinded by its own hubris. The cities, once symbols of human achievement, now stood as monuments to vanity. The air was thick with smoke, the earth scarred by years of greed and corruption. The world was on the verge of destruction, yet the people still did not see it. They did not hear the whispers of doom. The Lamb had arrived, but by the time humanity realized, it was far too late. A man had risen to power. His name was spoken in every home, his face seen on every screen. He was the one who would bring peace, prosperity, a new world. He promised the end of suffering, the return of the golden age. Nations raised their flags in his honor. The people, the masses, believed in him. They cheered for him. But there was something in his eyes, something hidden, a darkness he dared not speak of. A shadow that lingered behind the facade of peace he painted for the world. And as the world reveled in their false paradise, the heavens watched in silence. The first seal broke. The sky tore open, a brilliant flash of white light descended to earth. From the cloud a rider appeared, dressed in armor that gleamed with unholy brilliance. He rode a white horse, his crown shining brighter than the sun, a bow in his hand. He was the conqueror, but not of lands. He came to conquer faith. And the world. The world hailed him as the one who would bring them salvation. But what they failed to see was that the first rider didn't come to deliver peace. He came to conquer with deception. And with every cheer of joy, the world took a step closer to destruction. And still, they cheered. But the darkness was already spreading. As nations united under the rider's banner, the world began to crumble. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, the streets darker. The sounds of laughter were drowned out by the low rumble of discontent. The cries of the innocent rang out in the night as the war began, and the second seal was broken. The earth trembled. A second rider appeared, his horse red as blood. He carried a sword forged in fire. The sky darkened, and the world plunged into chaos. Peace was taken from the earth, and with it, the last shreds of hope. The cries of mothers, the screams of children, filled the streets. War had come. The rider raised his sword to the heavens, and the world answered in blood. "Is this the peace we sought?" A voice whispered through the smoke, but no one listened. As the fire consumed the earth, the third seal was broken. The sky itself began to fall apart. From the darkened clouds, a rider on a black horse emerged. His scales, cold and unyielding, tipped as he passed. The balance of the earth hung in the air like a fine thread, waiting to snap. The world was in ruins, but the hunger was what hurt most. The poor starved, and the rich ate scraps, fighting over morsels of bread. Where is the salvation promised? But no one knew the answer. Then the fourth seal broke. A rider on a pale horse appeared. As he passed, the very earth seemed to die. The cities fell silent, the rivers ran dry, fields once green turned to dust. The seas themselves seemed to boil with fury as the heavens darkened in mourning. It was no longer just war, it was destruction. And humanity still did not see. The Lamb stood silent, watching as the world teetered on the brink of collapse. His eyes, calm and filled with power, held the weight of all that was coming. The seals had been broken and there was no turning back. As the last remnants of life clung to the world, the heavens began to stir. The sky grew heavy with anticipation. The fifth seal broke. Beneath the throne, the souls of the faithful cried out, "How long, O Lord, will you allow this to continue?" And the answer came, not in words, but in a silent promise. "Wait, the number of the faithful must be complete." And so the world fell deeper into darkness. But the judgment had only just begun. As the flames of the earth flickered in their final moments, a sound like thunder echoed across the sky. The Lamb, still holding the book of judgment, began to move. His presence cut through the firmament, and the universe held its breath. The final seal was near. And then, as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, the seventh trumpet sounded. It was the beginning of the end. The sky has been sealed, no mercy remains. The earth trembled beneath the weight of the second trumpet. It was no longer just the heavens watching the world unravel. The Lamb moved in silence, but his presence was felt in every soul. As the fifth seal was broken, and the faithful cried out, humanity was left with nothing but the consequences of its arrogance. The hope that they could escape judgment had faded. They were now left to face the truth. The time for mercy had passed. The third seal shattered the last remnants of their defiance. With a single breath, the flames of war, greed and hunger spread across the earth, consuming everything in their path. The blood of millions stained the soil. The rich, the poor, the innocent, all were caught in the fire, for no one could escape. Nations that once embraced peace were now devouring each other. The rivers of the earth ran dry as the sky bled red. Cities that had been symbols of human achievement crumbled, swallowed by the chaos. There was no solace, no escape, no more promises of salvation. The third rider rode with a balance. He did not come to restore order. He came to weigh the souls of the damned, to judge what was left of humanity. The earth's suffering was now on display for all to see. The masses cried out for redemption, but redemption was no longer an option. The price had already been paid. The arrival of the beast. As the night turned to an eternal darkness, the fourth seal broke. A cold wind swept across the earth, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. The skies became a canvas of agony, each star dimming in the presence of the pale rider. The sun itself seemed to bow before the inevitable. Cities turned to dust. Fields that had once bloomed with crops now lay barren, the soil poisoned by the greed of mankind. Those who had once stood on the edges of power now knelt before the wreckage of what was left. The Lamb stood in the heavens. Its eyes shone with a sorrow so deep it could not be contained. The truth had been revealed, the judgment was complete, and yet the beast was coming. Far below, the sea began to churn. From the depths a figure emerged, the beast. He was no man but something darker, something ancient, whose eyes glowed with an unholy fire. His presence alone shook the world, his mere gaze causing men to tremble in fear. As the beast emerged from the water, the earth began to crack and split. The sky burned with the fury of hell. The nations fell before him, and with one stroke of his hand, the world surrendered to his rule. He promised peace, unity, salvation, but beneath the surface, only darkness awaited. No sooner had the beast ascended than the false prophet appeared. Dressed in robes of power, his voice was a song of lies, soothing the masses into submission. His words were a salve, offering hope in a world where it had all but died. The world bowed before him, giving its allegiance freely, believing that they had been saved. And so the mark of the beast was given. As the false prophet spoke, the people raised their hands, not knowing that they were sealing their fate. Those who accepted the mark were marked for eternity, their souls bound to the beast, their lives traded for temporary peace. They thought they had conquered death, but in truth, they had embraced eternal damnation. But not everyone bowed to the beast. In the shadows of the crumbling world, small groups of resistance began to rise. The faithful, hidden in caves and ruins, whispered of the Lamb, of redemption, of the judgment yet to come. They did not fear the beast, nor did they worship his prophet. Instead, they clung to the hope that even in the darkness there was light. Their faith became their shield, and they prepared for the inevitable battle, for they knew deep down that the beast's reign was short-lived. The time of the final confrontation was at hand. And then the sixth seal broke. The world shook, its foundations cracking beneath the weight of the heavens themselves. The stars fell from the sky like shattered glass, each one a warning. The moon turned red as blood, and the sun was hidden in blackness. The earth itself began to mourn. From the broken sky came a voice, one that shook the very earth beneath them. It was the voice of the Lamb, his judgment echoing across the heavens, and with it, a promise: the battle has been set. The battle for humanity. The earth held its breath, the heavens waiting for the final command. The Lamb's eyes shone with power, his hands lifting the book that would bring about the end. The final judgment would be poured out, and the earth would finally receive what it had long deserved. But there was still time, there was still hope. The faithful were ready. As the armies of the beast prepared to march, the skies above the battlefield began to crack open. The Lamb would come, riding on a white horse, his armies of light at his side. The final confrontation was at hand. The battlefield was set. And as the armies of hell prepared to clash with the armies of heaven, a single question echoed across the earth: who will survive the storm? The first trumpet sounds, and the world will never be the same. Will the Lamb's judgment be enough to save humanity, or has it already lost? It is finished. The words echoed across the heavens with a finality that shook the very foundation of the earth. The Lamb, the eternal judge, stood silent. The battle had begun. Below, the earth trembled in anticipation, the wind howling as the armies of hell prepared for the final confrontation. The armies of the beast, those who had sworn their allegiance to him, were vast and seemingly unstoppable. Their banners flew high, black as night, and the smell of sulfur hung thick in the air. But the heavens had already prepared for war. The Lamb, still seated upon his throne, raised his hand. The sky above began to crack open, a blinding light shining through the darkness like a beacon. The angels of the Lord, clad in armor of brilliant light, stood ready. Their wings fluttered like storms of fire, and the sound of their battle cry could be heard echoing across the heavens, filling every corner of creation with a sense of urgency. The final judgment was near. The earth had reached its breaking point. Humanity, in its pride, had forgotten the very essence of life. They had worshipped false gods, pursued hollow dreams, and allowed darkness to claim their hearts. Now, it was time for the reckoning. On one side, the beast and his followers prepared for the final battle. They were armed with power, greed, and a promise that everything would be theirs. Their leader, the beast, stood tall, his 7 heads watching the earth with fiery eyes. He was a figure of terror, a creature born from the very pits of hell. His power was unmatched, and his followers believed that victory was inevitable. On the other side, the Lamb, the final battle was not one of flesh and blood. It was a battle of light versus darkness, truth versus lies. The Lamb of God, the eternal Word, stood as the light in the darkness, holding the sword of truth in his hand. His eyes, though filled with sadness, burned with a power that could never be extinguished. The armies of heaven charged. With a deafening roar, the angels, led by Michael, the prince of the heavenly hosts, descended from the skies. Their swords glowed with divine fire, their faces set with the resolve of warriors who knew the battle was not just for the fate of the earth, but for the fate of all eternity. "We fight for the souls of mankind," Michael's voice rang out as he led the charge, his flaming sword cutting through the air. As the angels descended, the earth itself began to react. The ground cracked open, and from the abyss, the demons of hell emerged. They were hideous, their forms twisted and deformed by the fires of hell. Their eyes glowed with malice, their claws sharp as they prepared to fight. Behind them, the beast, towering above, watched as his army began to clash with the forces of light. The sky burns. The battle between heaven and hell was unlike any that had ever been seen. The sky above burned with fire, streaks of lightning crossing through the heavens, illuminating the chaos below. Thunder roared, shaking the very foundation of the world. The earth trembled as the ground became a battlefield. The armies of the beast were strong, their numbers overwhelming, but the armies of heaven, though fewer in number, were led by the Lamb, and their strength came from a power that could not be defeated. As the two sides clashed, the very earth seemed to groan under the weight of the conflict. The skies above turned black with smoke, the air thick with the smell of burning sulfur and the cries of the damned. But even in the midst of this chaos, there was something undeniably hopeful about the Lamb's presence. He was not here to destroy. He was here to redeem. The battle raged on, the forces of heaven clashing with the demonic horde in a war that seemed to echo throughout time and space. The angels fought with a ferocity, their swords cutting through the air like lightning, each strike sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The beast's minions, though strong in their hatred, were not immune to the power of the Lamb's light. As the battle reached its peak, the Lamb moved forward, his eyes never leaving the beast. The air was thick with tension, the world holding its breath as the final confrontation approached. The beast, with all his might, charged toward the Lamb, his 7 heads twisting with fury. He was determined to end this battle once and for all. But as he neared, the Lamb raised his hand. A blinding light filled the sky. It was not a light of destruction, but of revelation. As the Lamb's presence overwhelmed the beast, the darkness that had consumed the earth began to recede. "It is finished." With that single word, the beast's power shattered. His 7 heads twisted in agony, his body writhing as the divine light pierced him. His followers too fell to their knees, their once unyielding allegiance shattered by the truth of the Lamb's power. The earth shook violently as the beast was cast down into the abyss from which he had emerged. The world, for the first time in an age, was quiet. But the Lamb was not done. As the beast and his forces fell, the Lamb raised his eyes to the heavens. The sky, which had been darkened by war and suffering, now began to clear. The once broken earth began to heal. "Behold, I make all things new," the Lamb's voice echoed through the heavens. As the last of the darkness faded away, the world was reborn. The mountains rose again, their once shattered peaks now strong and steadfast. The seas, which had boiled with fury, calmed and became clear as glass. The rivers flowed once more, their waters fresh and pure. The earth itself began to breathe again. From the sky above, a new city began to descend. The New Jerusalem. Its streets were paved with gold, its walls of precious stones. The city glowed with a brilliance that no human eye had ever seen. It was a place of peace, of unity, and of hope. The Lamb stood at the gates of the city, his arms open in welcome. "Come," he called to the faithful, those who had endured, those who had held on to the light even in the darkest hours. "Enter into the joy of your Lord." The redeemed, those who had resisted the beast and chosen the Lamb, entered the city. They were clothed in white, their faces shining with the glory of God. They walked through the gates, their hearts full of joy and peace, for they knew that the suffering had ended and a new era had begun.
It is done.
The Lamb's voice was the final word. The battle had been won. The beast had fallen. The darkness had been defeated, and a new heaven and a new earth had been born. And for the redeemed, there was no more pain, no more death, no more sorrow, only peace, only light. The eternal light shone bright as day, and the redeemed sang songs of victory. But in the distance a new horizon beckoned. Could this peace last forever, or had the Lamb merely set the stage for the next chapter in an eternal struggle?